You signed the papers. Eliza, that's all the closeness we need. Julian's voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was flat, devoid of any emotion, as if discussing a quarterly report or confirming a wire transfer. It was a statement of fact, a closing argument. It didn't just dump ice water over my head. It was the ice. He adjusted the cufflink on his expensive shirt, his gaze fixed on the rain-lashed window of our Seattle penthouse. Pointedly away from me, I stood frozen in the doorway of our bedroom. The delicate, champagne-colored lace of the lingerie I'd spent an hour choosing suddenly felt cheap, pathetic. A costume for a play only I was performing in. I had bought it specifically for tonight. Imagining. What? That this night would be different. That the man I married 6 weeks ago would finally look at me. See me. As he once had. 6 weeks. Tonight was our 6-week anniversary. 6 weeks of being Mrs. Eliza Hayes. A title I had been so proud to take. And in those 6 weeks, my husband hadn't laid a single finger on me. Not a caress. Not a lingering kiss. Not even a handhold that lasted more than a polite, public second. I'd tracked the days. The hours. 42 nights of sleeping next to a beautiful, cold, marble statue. 42 nights of him claiming exhaustion from work. Or a looming headache. Or simply turning his back before I'd even finished brushing my teeth. 42 nights of me pretending to fall asleep. My body aching with a rejection so profound, it felt like a physical illness. My mind screaming, why? 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 My name is Eliza Hayes. And at 27, I genuinely believed I'd found my forever when Julian Hayes proposed to me on a crisp autumn day at Cary Park. The entire Seattle skyline glittered behind us. A perfect backdrop for a perfect moment. I remembered how he'd wrapped his arms around me then, burying his face in my hair, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, I can't believe I found you. Eliza. Don't ever leave me. His desperation to marry me, to lock me down, had been intoxicating. The wedding hadn't been some massive affair, but it had been perfect. An intimate, elegant ceremony at the historic Seattle City Hall, followed by a lavish reception at a restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. He'd insisted on paying for everything. A grand gesture of protection. Or perhaps, I now realized, a transaction. Our friends and family had toasted us, their eyes shining with joy, convinced they were witnessing the start of an epic love story. But as I stood there, clutching the doorframe, watching the rigid, unapproachable set of my husband's shoulders, I knew my fairy tale was rotting from the inside out. Julian. Please, I whispered, my voice trembling, hating how small and desperate I sounded. We're married. I'm your wife. I tried to inject a strength I didn't feel. I don't understand. Before the wedding, you were Zoe. I trailed off, the memories sharp and painful. Our 9-month romance had been a whirlwind. He'd met me at a charity gala I'd organized, appearing out of nowhere like the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I'd made. He was charming, attentive, and focused entirely on me, making me feel like the only person in the room. He'd learned my vulnerabilities, my dreams, my deepest desire for a true partner, and he had mirrored them all perfectly. He'd been affectionate, romantic, pulling me close during movies, holding my hand tightly as we walked through Pike Place Market, whispering about the future we would build. You couldn't keep your hands off me. I finished, the accusation hanging in the opulent crate of the Sedgin. Silent room. Then we went to the San Juan Islands. And suddenly you had debilitating migraines. Every single night. Julian, you wouldn't even let me rub your temples. Don't finish that sentence, he said, his voice dropping, though he still didn't turn. That was courtship. Eliza, this is marriage. It's different. Different how my voice rose, fueled by a sudden spike of desperate anger. Different as in, you stop touching me entirely, as in you flinch when I try to kiss you goodnight, as in you sleep on the extreme edge of this king-sized bed like I'm carrying a plague. He finally turned, and the sight of his face made my stomach clench. His blue eyes, the ones that had once looked at me with such warmth and adoration, were now cold and guarded. For a fleeting, almost imperceptible second, I saw something else flicker in their depths. Not annoyance, not anger. Was it regret, a flash of discomfort, as if he was trapped, too, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that chilling, impenetrable wall. I told you, he said, stepping past me. This arrangement is complex. He paused by the door, his back to me again. Eliza, he said, and his tone was almost soft, which was somehow more jarring than the coldness. Can't we just be content? We have this beautiful home. We have financial security. Why does it have to be more content? The word felt absurd, insulting. Content with being roommates. That isn't what I agreed to. This isn't an arrangement. Julian, I shot back, following him into the living room. My earlier vulnerability, hardening into suspicion. This is a marriage. Married people are intimate. They share things. They build a life. You're building walls. He let out a short, bitter laugh. The brief flicker of humanity gone. You want to talk about building? We built something. We signed a contract. A prenuptial agreement. Remember, to protect both our assets. He'd presented it so logically weeks before the wedding. It's just standard practice. Eliza, it protects you just as much as me. I'd been so in love. So eager to prove I wasn't after his vaguely defined money, that I'd barely glanced at the clauses. My father, a cautious lawyer himself, had begged me to review it with him. Just a formality. Dad, I'd insisted, signing my name with a flourish. We're secure. Eliza. Julian continued, his voice regaining its boardroom chill. Isn't that what matters? His words were technically true. Consent was paramount. But this felt like a perversion of it, using the language of boundaries to justify a complete and total emotional and physical abandonment of his wife. I'm going to go for a drive, he said, grabbing his keys and wallet from the hall table. It's nearly 11 at night. Julian, where are you going, client meeting? It's urgent. He was already out the door, the lock clicking shut with damning finality before I could protest further. I was left alone in the echoing silence of our home, the city lights blurring through the tears. I refused to let fall. He was hiding something. The thought was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. I walked back into the bedroom, the scent of his expensive cologne hanging in the air, mocking me. My eyes landed on his laptop, sitting closed on the antique desk in the corner. He was obsessively private about it, always closing it when I entered the room, never leaving it logged in. This was wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird. This was a violation. This wasn't me. I didn't snoop. I didn't spy. I trusted. But who was I trusting, the man who courted me? Or the stranger who married me? The guilt was acidic, burning my throat. What if I find nothing I thought? Terrified. Then I'm the monster. I'm the paranoid wife who destroyed everything. But what if I find something? My hands were shaking so violently I could barely type. I sat down and opened the lid. The password screen glowed. I tried the obvious, our wedding date. Access denied. My birthday. Access denied. His birthday. Access denied. I tried the name of the startup he supposedly managed. Access denied. I leaned back, defeated. The guilt mixing with desperation. This was insane. I should stop. I should go to bed and pretend this night. This whole 6 weeks didn't happen, but his words echoed. The key to his coldness. You signed the papers. Eliza. A prenuptial agreement. Remember, it was a long shot. A cold, sick feeling washed over me, driven by an impulse I couldn't name. I typed in a new set of numbers. Not a date of love, but a date of business. The date, 6 weeks and 1 day ago, that I had sat in his lawyer's office and, blinded by love, signed the prenup. The screen flickered. Welcome. J. Hayes. My breath hitched. I hadn't been wrong to be suspicious. I had only been wrong about the man I married. The key to my husband wasn't in his heart, it was in his finances. And I had just unlocked the door. For a long moment, I just stared at the illuminated desktop. It was terrifyingly clean. No personal photos. No cluttered files. Just a few generic folders. Work. Finance. Utilities. My guilt was a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. I was here, in his private space, without permission. This was a line I'd never thought I'd cross. My hands, slick with sweat. They were trembling so hard, I had to rest them on the desk. This was wrong. Fundamentally wrong. This was the act of a jealous, paranoid person. But the man who had just walked out that door wasn't the man I'd promised to trust. The man I'd married was a cold stranger. And the password to his life wasn't our love. It was our contract. The memory of his voice. That's all the closeness we need was the only permission I needed. I was not a paranoid wife. I was a woman waking up in a stranger's house. My hand moved the mouse to the finance folder. It opened immediately. It was mostly empty, except for one file that made my blood run cold. It wasn't named Hours or Household or Future. It was named Eliza, Trust, Assets, Q4. I clicked it. My entire financial life was laid out in a meticulous, chillingly detailed spreadsheet. My inheritance from my grandmother. My personal savings. My stocks. Every penny I had brought into this marriage, which Julian had always dismissed as our little nest egg, was catalogued. There were columns for current value, institution, and one that made my stomach drop: liquidity, status. He wasn't just tracking what I had, he was tracking how fast he could access it, how quickly it could be moved, transferred, and made to disappear. It wasn't the spreadsheet of a loving husband. It was the inventory of an asset manager preparing for a hostile takeover. Or an auctioneer. I backed out, my stomach churning. I felt like I was going to be sick, the bile rising in my throat. This was calculated. This was planned. I clicked on the work folder, my dread mounting. I was expecting client proposals or investment reports. It was filled with documents. Dozens of them. All neatly organized into subfolders. Client, comms, projections, travel. But they looked off. I opened one from projections. A quarterly projection. The text was lorem ipsum. Placeholder text. The graphs were generic templates. I opened another. And another. They were all shells. I clicked on client, comms. It was full of email templates. Dear client, regarding your portfolio. They were documents designed to look like legitimate financial work, to be produced at a glance, but utterly hollow upon inspection. His urgent client meeting tonight was almost certainly a lie. His entire career. The sophisticated, high-stakes world he described. It was all a performance. A stage set. My shaking hands moved to the last place I could look. Photos. It was mostly empty, save for one folder titled UT Trip. My breath hitched. He'd told me about that trip. Said it was a solo, soul-searching hiking trip in Zion before we met. I clicked it. There were only 3 pictures. They were not of Julian hiking. They were of him, standing outside what looked like a small-town courthouse, somewhere with dry, red hills in the background. Utah. He was beaming. A smile I hadn't seen in months. That genuine, knee-weakening smile he'd used on me for 9 months. His arm was wrapped tightly around a woman. A brunette. Pretty. Smiling just as brightly back at him. They were both holding up a piece of paper. Their heads tilted together. A certificate. My eyes zoomed in. The image pixelating slightly, but the truth horrifyingly clear. Certificate of marriage. They were both wearing wedding rings. Not the ring he wore for me, the custom-designed platinum band, but a different. Simple gold band. The date stamp on the photo. Embedded in the file's metadata. Read 9 months ago. 4 months before he met me at the gala. 4 months before he'd ever laid eyes on me. The room spun. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent apartment. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream as I gagged. He was married. He was already married. He had been in Utah, marrying someone else, while he was gearing up to find his next target. Me. I fell back onto the bed. The guilt of snooping vaporized, replaced by a terrifying, Arctic cold clarity. This wasn't a marriage in trouble. This wasn't a man struggling with intimacy. This was a fraud. A criminal act. My entire relationship. My wedding. My life with him was a lie. The next morning, I moved like an automaton. I waited until he left for his office at 8:30 a.m. sharp, just as he always did. The picture of disciplined professionalism. I called the one person my father had insisted I keep on retainer after he passed. Mrs. Hayes's office. This is Barbara. Barbara. It's Eliza. Eliza Hayes. I said, my voice sounding foreign. Finn. Eliza. Dear. A pleasure. How is married life treating you? Barbara Hayes was my father's contemporary. A sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer who had handled my trust for years. She was family. But she was also a shark. I need to see you, I said, cutting her off. Today, it's about Julian and the prenup. Her office was all glass and steel, overlooking the gray waters of the Sound. It was sterile. A place for facts, not feelings, which was exactly what I needed. I sat across from her polished desk, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. He's not who he said he was. I began. I told her everything, the words spilling out in a flat, numb, monotone. The coldness, the lack of intimacy, the password, the spreadsheet of my assets, the liquidity, status column, the fake work files, and finally, the photographs. He's already married. Barbara. He married another woman in Utah. Months before he even met me. Barbara's expression, usually so composed, tightened. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Not in a weary way, but in a way that I recognized as suppressed fury. Eliza, she said, her voice grave. What you're describing. This isn't grounds for divorce. This is grounds for an annulment based on fraud. What you're alleging is a crime. A crime, bigamy. It's a felony in this state. And in Utah, if his marriage to this, Maria, you saw in the photo predates yours, then your marriage to him is legally void. It never happened. The word void should have been a relief. Instead, it just made me feel hollowed out. Era said. But the prenup, I whispered. The humiliation hot on my cheeks. He made me sign it. I barely read it. It gives him half of everything if I file for divorce within the first year. A contract entered into under fraudulent pretenses is invalid, she said, her voice hardening. He can't enforce a prenuptial agreement for a marriage that doesn't legally exist. But this spreadsheet, this suggests a deliberate, organized plan to defraud you. This isn't just a romantic con. Eliza, this is organized crime. She leaned forward. He wanted you to find out he was cold. He was pushing you to file for divorce. The prenup was his easy out. He gets half your trust. Legally. And moves on. The spreadsheet was Plan B. Outright theft if Plan A took too long. We can handle the annulment here. But you are dealing with a professional con artist. We need to know who he really is. Who this woman is. And how deep this scheme goes before he realizes you're onto him and vanishes with your money. You need an investigator. I know just the man. An hour later, I was in a much less impressive office downtown, smelling faintly of stale coffee and rain. David Kincaid was a former Seattle PD detective, a man in his 50s with tired eyes that missed nothing. I repeated my story for the third time. I felt numb, detached, as if describing a movie I had watched. Kincaid didn't interrupt. He just listened, taking meticulous notes in a small black book. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he looked up, his gaze sharp. Did he rush the wedding? Yes. 9 months. He said he couldn't wait. Did he try to isolate you? Suggest your friends were a bad influence? Or your family too? Interfering, he. Yes. He hated when I had dinner with my sister. Said she was negative. Did he handle all the paperwork for the wedding? The house. Yes. He said he wanted to take care of everything for me. Kincaid nodded slowly. I've seen this before. Not often. But I've seen it. The pattern is classic. They target. They isolate. They rush the marriage to get legal access. And then they drain the accounts. The lack of intimacy. That's common. It's cleaner for them. No emotional attachment to complicate the exit. But he seemed so real. I protested, hating how naive I sounded. They're actors. Ms. Hayes. The best in the world. They become who you need them to be. Your file on his laptop, that was sloppy. He's getting arrogant. He put down his pen. I'll start with the basics. His real name. Julian Hayes's is probably an alias. I'll run the Utah marriage license for him and Maria. I'll check his employment claims. Though we both know what I'll find. I'll also put surveillance on him. I want to know where he's really going when he leaves you. He handed me a business card. Go home. Act normal. This is the hardest part. You must be the loving, slightly confused, but obedient wife for a little while longer. Don't confront him. Don't change your routine. Don't let him know the curtain has been pulled. He's a criminal, and cornered animals are dangerous. Can you do that? I thought of Julian's cold eyes, his calculated lies. The guilt I'd felt about the laptop was gone. Now, there was only a hard nod of determination. Yes, I said, my voice steady for the first time. I can. That night, acting normal was the hardest thing I had ever done. Kincaid had given me a small, high-sensitivity, digital recorder. No bigger than a flash drive. Put it in his office. He'd instructed. Colorado is a one-party consent state. But Washington is a two-party consent state for private conversations. It means recording him without his knowledge is legally complex. However, given he's committing multiple felonies against you in your own home, I'm not worried about the legal blowback. We need his intent. In his own words, this is about capturing a criminal conspiracy, not a domestic dispute. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the tiny device. I walked into Julian's home office, a room I now saw as a stage prop, a facade of legitimacy. I felt a fresh, acidic wave of self-loathing. I was planting a bug. I was spying. The Eliza, I knew the one who organized charity galas and believed in trusting people until they gave you a reason not to, would be horrified. This was a violation of the deepest trust. But that Eliza was gone. Burned away by the revelation in the UT trip folder. That Eliza had been a fool. A target. This new Eliza, the one left behind, was cold and pragmatic. I knelt by his antique desk, my heart hammering a frantic, guilty rhythm. Every creak in the hallway made me jump. Convinced he'd forgotten something and was coming back. My fingers fumbled with the adhesive strip. This was a point of no return. I stuck the tiny device under the lip of the desk, where it was completely invisible unless you were on your hands and knees. I stood up, brushed off my pants, and took a deep, shuddering breath. The air smelled of his cologne and old leather. It made me want to gag. I made dinner, a pasta dish he'd once claimed to love. The motion's automatic. He came home precisely at 6. Kissed me on the cheek, a dry, papery, completely sexless touch that made my skin crawl and complemented the meal. We sat at the long dining table, the city lights glittering beyond the glass walls. "You seem quiet tonight," he said, studying me over the rim of his wine glass. His blue eyes were perfectly attentive. I forced a small, tired smile. My stomach in knots. Just a long day. "I'm worried. About us. Julian. This distance. It was the truth. Just not the one he thought. I was playing his game. Using a real emotion as a mask." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His skin was warm, his touch practiced and smooth. A perfect facsimile of concern. "I know. Eliza. I'm so sorry. This project at work is just all-consuming. I've never dealt with anything this high stakes. I promise. Once it closes, it'll be like it was before. Just you and me." I met his gaze. My heart, a block of ice. He was lying as easily as he breathed. As he sipped his wine, I saw the brief flicker of what I'd once mistaken for regret. It wasn't regret. It was calculation. He was assessing me, seeing if his performance was landing, if I was still securely on the hook. I nodded, pulling my hand back gently, as if sadly, not in revulsion. "Okay, I'm going to turn in early. I think I have a headache." He excused himself to take a call in his office about 20 minutes later. The door clicked shut. This was it. I waited. My breath held, before creeping down the carpeted hall. I didn't dare press my ear to the wood, too risky. I just stood a few feet away, my own phone in my hand, its own recorder on, a backup just in case the bug failed. I felt like a character in a cheap spy novel. His voice was different, muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. It was warmer, more animated. The voice he had used on me during those first 9 months. "I know. Baby. I miss you too," he said. I flinch. The word baby, a physical blow. "No. It's almost done. I promise. This one. It's just more complicated than the others." There was a pause. He laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of shared intimacy, a sound he had never, not once, made in my presence since our wedding day. "No. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's just, I don't know. Nice. It's almost a shame. She's planning to file for divorce. I think I'm pushing her right to it. The cold shoulder. The work stress. It's working perfectly. The prenup is a work of art. Her idiot father is gone, and her lawyer is just a trust fund manager. Once she files, the first-year clause kicks in. I walk with half the trust. And it's all legal." My blood ran cold. He was pushing me. His coldness. His rejection. It was all a strategy to make me the one who broke the marriage. Triggering his payday. He listened again. "No. I'm not going soft. Maria. Don't be stupid. It's just, she's not simple. Like the others. She's got standards. But she'll break. Like they all do. I'll see you Friday. I love you. Too." He was talking to her. Maria. His wife. And he was planning to rob me blind. The casual cruelty of it. The way he discussed my breaking like it was a business projection erased the last lingering trace of the man I thought I'd loved. That brief hesitation, it's almost a shame, didn't make him human. It made him more monstrous. He saw my decency, my standards, and was simply factoring them into his equation as a minor obstacle. I crept back to bed, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. I had it. His voice, his intent, his plan, the admission of the prenup, the confirmation of Maria. I retrieved the recorder hours later, after he was asleep, his back turned to me as always. The next 2 days were an agony of pretense. I smiled. I made coffee. I acted like a loving, worried wife. Kincaid's call, when it came, shattered my newfound resolve into a million pieces. I took it in my car, parked in a grocery store lot. Eliza, are you somewhere private? Kincaid's voice was grim. Yes. In my car. I ran the Utah marriage license. It's real. Julian Hayes married Maria Sanchez 8 months ago in Kane County. That's the good news. We have the bigamy charge cold. Thank God. I breathed, a wave of relief washing over me. It was real. I wasn't crazy. Don't thank him yet, Kincaid said, his voice flat. I ran Julian Hayes. It's an alias. His real name is Julian Caldwell. I ran Maria Sanchez. Also an alias. Her real name is Maria Caldwell. Caldwell, I repeated, confused. So they were related before they got married, cousins. There was a heavy silence on the line. Eliza. They're siblings. Julian and Maria Caldwell are brother and sister. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor of my car. The world tilted. The colorful signs of the grocery store blurring. Siblings. The intimate phone call I'd overheard. The I love you. Baby. The shared laughter. It wasn't to a wife. It was to his sister. The photos of them beaming outside the courthouse. The shared smiles. My mind couldn't process it. I fumbled for the phone, jamming it against my ear, my stomach heaving. I gagged. A dry, harsh sound. It was too sick, too depraved. Eliza, are you still there? Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling. My God, it gets worse, Kincaid said, his voice hard as stone. They've done this before. I've found at least 2 other women. One in Arizona. One in Oregon. Same M. O. Whirlwind romance. Quick marriage to Julian. Followed by a messy divorce where he walks away with a significant settlement. Maria plays the part of the other woman, or, in this case, the first wife, to add legitimacy or pressure. It's a highly sophisticated, multi-state fraud operation. They've been doing this for at least 5 years, netting millions. He took a breath. This is out of my hands now. Eliza, this is interstate wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. This is federal. I've already made a call to a friend at the FBI. They're very, very interested in the Caldwell siblings. The recording you got, the one where he admits to the prenup scheme and wire fraud, that's the nail in the coffin. They're going to want to set a trap. They're going to want to catch him in the act of accessing your funds. He paused. Eliza, this is going to get very real. Very fast. You're not just dealing with a con man. You're dealing with a dangerous, established criminal ring. Are you ready for this? I looked out my car window at a mother buckling her child into a car seat. A normal life. A life I had been so close to. The life Julian and his sister had mocked and planned to destroy. The sickness in my stomach was replaced by a cold, burning rage. Yes, I said, my voice shaking, but my resolve like steel. Let's burn them to the ground. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room at the U.S. Attorney's office. A place that felt so far removed from my penthouse life, it might as well have been on another planet. It was me, Barbara, Kincaid, and 2 FBI agents, a woman named Agent Reed and a man named Agent Chen. They were all business, their faces grim. "Ms. Hayes," Agent Reed began, her voice crisp. "Mr. Kincaid's findings are, unfortunately, correct. We've had a file open on the Caldwell ring for 2 years. They're slippery. They hit wealthy, isolated targets, bleed them dry, and vanish before the victim even realizes what's happened. Your case, this is the first time we've had a man on the inside, so to speak. Your recordings are a goldmine." The spreadsheet on his laptop, Agent Chen interjected, "wasn't just an inventory. We've monitored the accounts he listed. He's already used your void marriage certificate and a forged power of attorney to open lines of credit against your trust fund. He hasn't drawn on them yet. He's just setting up the plumbing." "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now, we force his hand," Reed said. "We've contacted the financial institutions. As of an hour ago, those new lines of credit are frozen. When he tries to access them, it won't be a hard no. It'll be a compliance delay, a security flag. He'll be asked to come in and verify his identity. But he won't do that if he thinks he's compromised." I said, "Exactly." Chen replied, "He needs a reason to move fast. He needs to feel like his window is closing. That's where you come in." I looked at them, my heart sinking. "What do I have to do?" "You're going to give him what he wants," Reed said, her eyes pinning me. "You're going to serve him with divorce papers." Barbara nodded grimly. "It's the bait. His entire plan, according to your recording, hinges on you filing. When you do, he'll feel victorious. He'll think his plan worked. And when he finds the accounts are delayed, he'll panic. He'll think the bank is just being slow. Not that the FBI is watching. He'll do something rash to get his money before the divorce complicates things. Serving a man I despised with divorce papers should have been easy, triumphant. Instead, it was terrifying. This was the final move, the one that would ignite the entire trap. I felt a tremor of fear, a flash of guilt that made no sense. I was setting a trap for a man who had planned to destroy me. Yet my hands were shaking as I held the envelope Barbara had prepared. I waited until he got home that evening. He was in his office, humming softly, probably talking to his sister. I knocked. "Julian," he turned. His smile, a practiced, weary mask. "Eliza. Everything. Okay." I couldn't speak. I just held out the envelope. My hand was visibly trembling. He looked at it, then at me. His eyes, for a split second, widened in genuine surprise. Then, the mask was back. But it was a new one. Resigned sadness. "I see," he said, taking the papers. He didn't open them. I guess I knew this was coming. "I'm sorry. Eliza. I'm so sorry I failed you." It was so perfectly delivered, so full of false sincerity, that my fear vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. He was still acting. "I'll be staying with my sister for a while," I said, my voice dead. "Of course," he said, his gaze dropping. "I understand." The plan was for me to go to a hotel. Kincaid had a surveillance team on the penthouse. The misstep, as Kincaid later called it, happened faster than any of us predicted. Julian didn't just call the bank. At 6 a.m. the next morning, Kincaid's team watched him leave the penthouse. Not with a suitcase, but with a briefcase. He met Maria at the airport. He's not going to the local branch. Kincaid called me, his voice urgent. He's on a flight to San Francisco. That's the bank's corporate headquarters. He's not trying to call customer service. He's going straight to the top. Probably to bully a VP into releasing the funds. He's bringing her looks like it. They're panicking. They think you're going to freeze the assets as part of the divorce. And they're trying to get the money and run today. The FBI had to scramble. Coordinating with their San Francisco field office, I spent the next 6 hours in Kincaid's office, pacing the worn carpet, my stomach in knots. This was the part of the plan that felt wrong. It was too fast. What if they got away? What if he'd had another plan? Another account we didn't know about. The victory felt anything but certain. It felt narrow. Desperate. The call came at 2:14 p.m. Kincaid listened, nodded, and hung up. He looked at me, his tired eyes showing the first glint of satisfaction I'd ever seen. They got them, he said. How they walked right into the bank's corporate security office. Bold as brass. Julian. Maria. And a briefcase full of your life. Forged passports. A forged power of attorney. And your void marriage certificate. They were trying to authorize a 7-figure international wire transfer to an account in Zurich. Agent Reed and the SF team were waiting for them in the office, pretending to be the bank's fraud department. They arrested them mid-signature. The arraignment was 2 weeks later. I sat in the back row, flanked by Barbara and Kincaid. This wasn't a movie. It was a sterile, fluorescent-lit federal courtroom. And then they were led in orange jumpsuits and shackles. The smug, handsome, sophisticated Julian Hayes was gone. His styled hair was messy, his face pale and stubbled. Maria, next to him, was sobbing quietly, her face blotchy. They didn't see me at first. They stood before the judge, their shoulders slumped. As the charges were read, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, bigamy, money laundering. The list went on and on. Then, as they were being led out, Julian's eyes scanned the gallery. He was looking for a lawyer. A lifeline. Anything. His gaze met mine. He stopped. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I just looked at him. My expression calm. I watched the blood drain from his face. I saw the exact moment the entire, complex reality hit him. The compliance delay. The perfectly timed divorce papers. His nicest victim. Sitting in the back of a federal courtroom. He finally understood. He hadn't been pushing me. I had been trapping him. The look on his face, not anger, not sadness, but a hollow, dawning comprehension of his own complete and utter destruction. That was my victory. Julian Caldwell was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for his role as the ringleader. His incestuous partnership with his sister added a level of depravity that shocked the court. And the evidence of the other victims sealed his fate. Maria received 10 years as a co-conspirator. My marriage was legally annulled, erased as if it had never happened. My trust, my assets, everything was secure. I celebrated quietly. I sold the penthouse. The view forever tainted. I moved into a smaller place, closer to my sister. Looking back, the betrayal still stings. It's a scar that will never fully fade. Julian's calculated cruelty taught me a devastating lesson about the darkness people are capable of. But it also taught me something about myself. To save my life, I had to become someone I never thought I could be, a woman who spied, who lied, who felt the burn of guilt and set a trap anyway. My victory wasn't clean or easy. It was a narrow, hard-fought battle that cost me my naivety. But in a world where predators like Julian exist, naivety is a luxury. I learned to trust that cold, prickling feeling in my gut. And I learned that the only person who can truly save you, in the end, is yourself. Sometimes, the stories that feel the most isolating are the ones that connect us the most. If you or anyone you know has ever felt trapped, silenced, or manipulated, please share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if this story resonated with you, Please like, share, and subscribe for more content about survival and resilience. You are not alone.